of all the ways Armenians could and have become kings throughout history, an endorsement from Europe, a crown crafted in Germany from the Holy Roman Emperor himself, and placed on his head by a Bavarian archbishop, has to be the weirdest. And yet here we sit with what has likely become the most celebrated coronation in Armenian history. There had been no king for over 150 years inside or outside of the Armenian homeland. The Armenians were now no longer occupiers of Cilicia and the Taurus Mountains, but kings of it. This Armenian experiment in Cilicia had turned into a second chance for a homeland. No longer were they lords of the mountains, but kings of them. Prince Leo, who had ruled in that manner for over a decade and in that short time expanded Cilicia Armenia to its largest extent with a reputation to match that, was now crowned as its first king. With new, heavier titles, there often come refreshed ambitions, new peaks to reach, less room for error, and war on the horizon. Having warred against and captured Antioch for a very short time previously, King Leo, with the rightful claim of his nephew, Raymond Ruben, and his Antiochian birthright, intended to make vassals of these ever-troublesome Latin princes. War was on the horizon in the northern Levantine, one that would plunge the entire region into chaos for over 2 decades, and long-term impacts for decades to come after that. Betrayal, greed, webs of alliances that ebb and flow, assassins, missing eyeballs, people drinking oil, Templars and Hospitallers fighting each other. I'm telling you, this story does have it all. After receiving his new crown, King Leo's first act as king was his most significant, at least in the eyes of the historian. To celebrate his crowning as king, Leo started the construction of Akhner Monastery. This religious complex of 3 separate cathedrals would become the cultural beacon for people who were far away from home. This was a new 1001 churches of Ani, all in one gigantic campus. Armenia's greatest religious and scientific minds gathered here, and here they compiled their histories. They told the story of how the Armenians got here, in this corner of mountains. And to this present day, the manuscripts there are the only reason I can make this video, and many other videos on Armenia. For the most part, they're all beautifully preserved in the library of Akhner. While the withering of years and rains and earthquakes have closed the monastery itself after more than 800 years in use, the knowledge it holds and has protected for centuries is beyond priceless. The complex was completed quickly, in a short 4 years after Leo's coronation. It, more than anything, symbolized Cilicia's golden age, enjoyed under the banner of their first king. While Leo was funding a cultural renaissance in his corner of the Middle East, he didn't become king just to sit around on the same lands he had already owned. He intended to add some more jewels to his crown. You'll find throughout history that some monarchs are just obsessed with conquering a specific people, country, person, or in this case, a city. Hannibal was obsessed with burning Rome. Alexander had chased Darius across the known world. The Hammer of the Scots had the nickname for a reason. And King Leo? Well, he was downright obsessed with capturing the city of Antioch. And, could you blame him? With a port only 20 miles away, it was the first target for the Crusaders and held a religious and strategic advantage at the Bay of Alexandretta. An advantage that would only protect Cilicia further by holding. Cis appeared as a fort on 2 hills where Antioch was a city of stone and steeples, coveted by all and all willing to do just about anything to covet it. The War of the Antiochian Succession was something that was always a probability after the untimely death of Antioch's heir, Raymond IV, Count of Tripoli and soon to succeed his father as the Prince of Antioch. Raymond IV was married to King Leo's niece through his late brother, Lady Alice of Tyrone. While Lady Alice was still pregnant with the Count's child, he died, and a few months later Raymond, he would now inherit as Raymond V of Tripoli or Raymond II of Antioch. But upon birth, his own grandfather and King Leo's arch-nemesis, Prince Bohemond III, disinherited Raymond and exiled he and his mother back to Cilicia. By law, Raymond Ruben was supposed to inherit Antioch, Tripoli, and Cilicia and practically unite the Crusader and Armenians, barring the Kingdom of Jerusalem itself. But as we will see, after 20 years of exhausting and demoralizing warfare, Raymond Ruben would end up with nothing. The war that would last the rest of Leo's reign as king, which is just crazy to say, would begin any day now. They only waited for a single death in Antioch that would send all the dominoes crashing down. Mysteriously, it only took 2 years after the coronation for Prince Bohemond III to drop dead, in a time where the Hashashim, the Order of Assassins, was becoming more influential and ever more daring with their targets. Perhaps King Leo paid the assassins. He certainly had enough money to cover the bill. Or maybe the assassins had Bohemond in their crosshairs for a while, which might just be even more believable. Regardless, his death is left a mystery, but would benefit King Leo the most. A race to Antioch began, one from the north, the other from the south. But Tripoli was much closer than Cis. Bohemond IV, Count of Tripoli and second son of the now dead Prince of Antioch, arrived in time for the funeral, and before Leo even left Cilicia. He claimed Antioch as his own. King Leo continued his course, not coming on behalf of his grandnephew Raymond Ruben to claim his rightful inheritance. No, Leo now came as a conqueror, as he had a time before this. Things were different now. His rival, dead, him, a king, his nephew's claim. Antioch would finally be his. It appeared sooner rather than later. Leo laid siege to Antioch, memories of the last time he had held the city as prince. It was in his grasp only to have it slip away at the last possible moment, and it was a hilarious moment. Bohemond IV was outnumbered and underprepared to deal with the Armenian king this soon. Not sallying out, Bohemond called on his two new allies, the Rum Sultanate and the Ayyubids of Syria. Both attacked Cilicia. With Antioch's walls still standing tall, King Leo was forced to return to Cilicia. These diversionary attacks were thwarted after having devastated the Cilician countryside for a time. Round 1 goes to Bohemond. This war was not one that happened for 20 years non-stop, but had phases to it as Antioch's allies, namely the King of Jerusalem and, oh yeah, the Pope, brought Leo to peace discussions, which Leo always accepted and more often than not betrayed when an opportunity to take the city presented itself. In 1202, such a peace treaty was agreed upon when Bohemond left Antioch to discuss terms with the mediating king of Jerusalem. This was enough for Leo to campaign in his absence. In early 1203, Leo returned to the walls more prepared and with a better plan this time. The Armenians stormed the outer walls at the onset of the siege, but most of the garrison and townspeople had gotten away to that always stout inner citadel. When that final battle came, the citizens of Antioch stood shoulder to shoulder with the Knights Templar. But that final battle never did come, as King Leo's lack of allies was appearing ever more a terrible problem. This time, the Ayyubids alone attacked Cilicia. King Leo lifted the siege and returned defeated to defeat another. Another round over, but this one feels more like a win for Leo, despite ultimately the missed opportunity. Leo went back to the drawing board and the Crusaders went back to attacking their fellow Christians. This time in what I like to call one of history's greatest atrocities. The Fourth Crusade, meant for the Holy Land, only made it as far as Constantinople before their bloodlust and Venetian greed got the best of them. They ransacked the Eastern Roman capital and nearly destroyed the rule of the Romans. The disfigured inbred creation of the Pope, Venetians, and various crusaders was born the Latin Empire. Initially held with high hopes of restoring Byzantium in a Western European fashion, Prince Bohemond quickly made alliance and soon after paid homage as a vassal to the Latin emperors. And just when Armenians, Cilicia, and the Byzantines were actually starting to get along, the Armenians woke the next day to see more fucking Westerners at their gates. In this same year of 1204, one of Bohemond IV's noblemen in Tripoli took a high-ranking noble wife without asking for his permission. It didn't take long for this love story to turn bloody, as the man became the head of a rebellion against the Count of Tripoli who has only been in Antioch as of late. In a dramatic scene, a climactic battle came at the gates of Tripoli itself. Under the hot sun, Bohemond met the rebel. Looking up in the midst of the battle, he caught an arrow in the eye. Miraculously, the man lived an arrow to the eyeball in the 13th century and came back understandably angrier, crushing his rebel nobleman and ending their little courtly love story that killed hundreds, because medieval marriage laws have no remorse. But this was more than sufficient distraction enough for King Leo to once again invade Antioch in 1205. Leo this time came more methodically, taking every single castle en route to Antioch instead of just those that guarded his escape. While doing this, the king, who was expecting his own kingdom to be attacked by the Ayyubids before his party, came under ambush at one of these sieges and was forced to make a hasty retreat back to the mountains. Round 3 goes to Bohemond, but it's really his allies. How did he even get these allies? The Rooms and the Ayyubids? In 1206, Leo was brought to a peace treaty again, this time agreeing to an 8-year truce. Yeah, fucking right, dude. Until the end of the next war, maybe. It didn't take long for proper drama to follow this peace. Infidelity was discovered in the Armenian court. King Leo's wife herself and mother to their only child, debatably now, was Isabella, who, from a previous peace treaty, was also the sister of the now-dead Bohemond III of Antioch's third wife. I know, it's kind of confusing. Caught with his own third cousin, Constan. Ouch. Some Game of Thrones shit. King Leo then, quote, violently struck the woman with his own hands, but resisted slaying her on the spot. She was exiled to Vaca on house arrest where her lover Constan showed up. Both died within a year of exile. Yeah, he killed them. There was something more powerful at play here than infidelity, which could have been completely made up. The pair had been married for 17 years and had one daughter and, more importantly, 0 male heirs. This could have just been a fabricated lie and murder just to fulfill the kingly duty of producing a successor. Regardless of how, Leo was a divorcee, and a proper lady of Antioch was dead. But for the foreseeable future, there was peace in Cilicia, but for Antioch it cannot be said the same. In a dimly lit room somewhere in that city, 2 old men of the church with the same name, you guessed it, Peter, were arguing about religion and the state of their patriarchy. On one side was Patriarch Peter, Antioch's seat of religious authority. On the other was Papal Legate Peter, who we will just call Papal Peter. Basically, Papal Peter's job was to fire Patriarch Peter on behalf of the Pope, who was doing so on behalf of Prince Bohemond himself. Patriarch Peter learned about this, excommunicated Bohemond and the merchant commune that was the real power behind the throne in the city. Then Patriarch Peter called for young Raymond Ruben himself to return as Prince of Antioch. Papal Peter wasn't fast enough with his own punishment, so Prince Bohemond apprehended Patriarch Peter, put him in a cell with nothing to drink, and was found dead after desperately drinking the only liquid available, oil from his lamp. Did he think it was going to work, though? A large portion of Antioch's nobles and people alike were moved by Patriarch Peter, and soon Bohemond was under siege in his own city as he moved to reinforce the citadel. The city had revolted against him, and Leo, for the second time in his life, literally walked into the city of Antioch without having to lift one finger. All he had to do was take that damn citadel once and for all. And before he could even dig in and begin a proper siege, Bohemond and his knights bursted from the keep and attacked the off-guard Armenians. A battle ensued in the streets, brutal hand-to-hand combat, while the city literally handed to him on a silver platter. King Leo had once again utterly choked as he limped back to Cilicia, defeated. Any sensible man would cut his losses here, but King Leo was no such man. After nearly 10 years of war, King Leo was about to drag his state into even more for naught. After Salah ad-Din, the Ayyubid dynasty and his 17 sons bickered over the inheritance until there was one sultan in Egypt and one in Syria. The Crusader states in Cilicia being as much a boundary and war zone as any to call a border between the two Ayyubid branches. Antioch was allied to Syria, but this had brought them their very own attack from Egypt. Salah ad-Din's own much younger brother had come to power by this point after some unscrupulous family affairs. The similarly named Saf ad-Din. Much like his brother in many ways, but not quite as memorable for whatever reason. I find him interesting. Saf ad-Din invaded Antioch in 1208, and I didn't bother to look up why, because at this point I don't need to. Did Saf ad-Din have to look for a reason to invade Antioch? No. Leo needed no justification either to invade Antioch, but violated the 8-year peace treaty in 2 years. From the north alongside, but never meeting with Sultan Saf ad-Din or his Egyptian army. With Jerusalem assisting on the Egyptian front, Bohemond simply pulled a name out of his hat of off-brand superhero allies, and this time chose Rum Sultan Kaikous to distract Leo. Seriously, this guy's only fought twice and he lost a goddamn eyeball in one of them. As expected, Leo returned from Antioch before his opponent had a chance of making much headway in his own country. As the war for Antioch raged into its second decade, and with this religious tone newly added by our Peter fight, the Patriarch of Jerusalem took his turn at bringing King Leo to the peace table. Finally, Leo was forced to give back the very thing that started this conflict in the first place, the old Templar stronghold on the Antiochian Armenian border, Bagras Fortress. Only King Leo did not return it back to the correct owners per se. Instead of handing over the fort to the Knights Templar, he gave it to the same group who had crowned him in the first place, the German Knights of the Teutonic Order. Even when Leo concedes, he always leaves a twist his enemies must scramble through in a brand new player in the region that would make for a fine ally now. It wouldn't end up that way, but the Teutons would never really side with the Armenians unless they were fighting Muslims. In the same year, perhaps at these same peace discussions, Ruben would find his first wife. There's only one problem with that. She was already married. I'm not sure if this is true, because only one gossipy kind of note survives that was sent to the Pope giving details to what exactly transpired. And I guess a 13-year-old Ruben kinda had Riz, because he ran away with and married one Lady Helvis from the house of Lusignan, daughter of a previous King Amory of Jerusalem. She was 21 and, might I mention again, married. There is also another translation of this papal note that suggests the Rubenids abducted these girls as well. Again, this seems far-fetched, but sure. A 13-year-old Armenian prince stole your girl. And on an even weirder note, to secure alliance with Cyprus, Ruben married his nephew's sister, which in itself is not unheard of, marrying sisters to cement an alliance, but the near 60-year-old king married the younger, much younger, 12-year-old sister. Yeah, not cool, dude. But if it's for alliance and to have a weird sister-wife thing with your grandnephew son or whatever the fuck the Rubenids guesses, it's okay. On the bright side, King Leo's new wife, if you could even call her that, did not have a child until she was 18, meaning Leo could have waited to consummate this marriage. Either way, creepy, and I'm done talking about this because the next episode in this series will be much, 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 much worse. The Reubenids get weirder and weirder every generation, I swear. Soon after finding his queen, Raymond Ruben was installed as junior king of Cyprus alongside the now senior king Leo. To celebrate the coronation of a new Armenian king, another crown from the Holy Roman Emperor Otto IV was generously gifted to the Reubenids. As well as a new crown and junior king, Leo gifted Cilicia with a new ring of fortresses all around these stretching borders it now found itself controlling. Fortresses set up in a way to dissuade the Rum Sultanate and Ayyubids from attacking Cilicia. But of course, this revamping of defensive wear was only to prepare for more wars with Antioch and now the Latins in general. In 1211, King Leo crossed the line with the Knights Templar. He raided a Templar caravan that was led by their Grand Master. The Pope had taken Bagras from the Teutons and had given it back to the Templars. Before William and his knights could remake their northern stronghold, King Leo ambushed and left many dead, with the Grand Master himself badly injured and barely escaping with his own life. This action caused the Pope to bring the big excommunication stamp right down on King Leo's forehead. This served to do little in hindering Leo, so the Pope cried for the King of Jerusalem to do something about it. So get this, the King of Jerusalem literally sends 50 knights. He sends 50 dudes to tell King Leo to stop. And hey, guess what? What do you think he does? He doesn't stop. Jerusalem was in no place to deal with the problems of its sister city in Antioch. It was a lost cause at this point. Raymond, the Rizzler, or whatever, at the rather young age of 14 was now given his first military command. He was sent to raid Antioch and come back. He was given a route his granduncle had taken quite a few times now at this point. This mission turned out to be a success, and Raymond returned in 1212, laden with spoils. Leo, who as of late had been taking the headstrong approach to taking Antioch, suddenly decided that this wasn't working and changed his tune. Leo made peace with everybody, the Templars, Jerusalem. He even got his excommunication lifted. But we all know that Leo just loved playing with the Pope. From my observations, I just think Leo was really fucking tired of trying and failing to take Antioch and was simply trying every avenue possible to achieve his goal. Just like another group who was willing to do just about anything. The Order of Assassins returns, and this time to be likely in the employment of King Leo of Cilicia. This time we know for sure that the assassins killed Prince Bohemond's eldest son, who was coincidentally also named Raymond. Those who benefited the most from this were, of course, the Rubenid duo of Cilicia. It meant that Raymond Ruben could continue his inheritance dispute for the long term. Bohemond retaliated at the Hashashim, and together, with a branch of the Ayyubids, besieged and took one of the many assassin strongholds that dotted the nearby mountains. Come to think of it, the assassins were carving a principality out in the mountains in a similar manner as the Armenians had in Cilicia. With another French heir of Antioch dead, King Leo decided to delegate the task that had consumed the latter portion of his adult life. If Antioch was Raymond Ruben's inheritance, then the lad was old enough now to get a hold of it himself. King Leo now only funded and supplied what was becoming his nephew's seemingly unwinnable war. Quite an inheritance that is. Raymond Ruben, having proven to at least be competent at this point, much like his uncle, threw himself into the seizure of Antioch. Much like Leo in his earlier years, Raymond Ruben attempted to conquer Antioch from within, making friends with the Armenian as well as the Latin nobility and bribing the merchant commune into relative passivity. Most peculiar of all, Ruben somehow managed to befriend the Knights Hospitaller. I don't know how exactly this happened, with my only guess basically being that the Templars and Hospitallers hated each other so much that they were willing to look for allies outside of their own religion. just despite their own rival order. Or maybe Raymond Ruben was pretending to be a Catholic. But an Armenian having the Hospitallers on his side just sounds crazy, like a fever dream. Furthermore, King Leo cemented an alliance of his own, marrying his only child Stephanie to the King of Jerusalem himself, John of Brienne. But King Leo was only willing to give his one child away because his second was already on the way. Another girl, Isabella, who was the name of his first wife that he hit and likely murdered, would be born in 1215, and the succession was still set to go to Raymond Ruben. Like his only brother, these two last male Rubenids only had 2 daughters, thereby sealing the dynasty, if it had not been for Raymond Ruben. If you don't count that as a new dynasty, which I don't personally, because his original dynasty disinherited him at birth. It only took Prince Raymond Ruben 2 years to get his affairs straight in Antioch for him to attempt his own coup. The exiled prince returned to his Crusader state in 1216. Despite the rather persistent threat to the city of Antioch posed by the Armenians, Bohemond IV had been Count of Tripoli since he was a boy, and he preferred to stay there if he could, and especially during the winter. It had almost been a year since Bohemond had left for Tripoli. With no sure sign of him returning anytime soon, the Rubenids struck. Both Raymond Ruben and King Leo entered the city of Antioch on Valentine's Day night. The gates opened upon their arrival, for the 3rd time, by an alliance of the local Armenian nobility and the city's charter of Knights Hospitaller. Despite having practical control of most of the city's swords, the Knights Templar resisted, and once again held the seemingly unbreachable inner fortress. After surrendering, the Templars were granted life and remained in their own Antiochian charter. And like always, every time Antioch came even under the slightest threat, Cilicia would be looted by an Ayyubid or a Rum Sultan. Like clockwork, this time the Rum began looting. Not only this, but they were actively taking forts this time around. King Leo's brand new forts would be in the enemy's hands now, but it was all worth it, because now his heir would finally claim his own unique birthright and become Antioch's first proper Armenian prince. Like his previous coronation and Leo's as king before that, a Catholic would lead his coronation ceremony as Raymond Ruben was finally crowned as Prince Raymond II of Antioch. And now, with the home country under the rule of the Georgians and their Zaccharid vassals, or the Ayyubids, Antioch joined Cilicia as the only independent Armenian state in the world. So of course, what else would they do now besides try to kill each other? Because Armenia. As the Rum attacked Cilicia, most of Leo's forces were in Antioch. He wanted to return to defend his lands. Raymond Ruben did not want him to leave, and having already claimed one inheritance, got too eager to claim the other. What if old Uncle Leo had a son? What if he found another child to give Cilicia to? Raymond Ruben ordered his loyalists in Antioch to arrest his granduncle that he owed his entire life to. But now that the Armenians ruled the city, they were introduced into the politics and whispers at this particular court. Word got around, eventually falling on Templar ears. Now choosing to side with Leo against Raymond and the Knights Hospitaller, they warned the king of the treachery and Leo escaped back to Cilicia. Okay, now Leo was definitely not a Catholic, and the Templars are siding with him now. On his way back, he gave Bagras Fortress to the Templars as the rightful owners. The little fort that had started all this bloodshed just got returned in the end. What is it good for? The city he had fought so long for had not only eluded him again, but now betrayed him, the last of his own kin, against him. Leo defeated the Rum, but had no desire to reconquer his brand new forts from them, perhaps waiting for his nephew to attack him at their very own border. Little did the 20-year-old Prince Raymond Ruben know how terrible a mistake this failed betrayal would be. Not only did he not have his only supporter's alliance, but after nearly 20 years of on and off, but mostly on, warfare, Antioch, city and countryside was dead broke, underpopulated, and not yet ready to stand completely alone in this particularly war-torn region. Antioch was short on just about everything, most lacking being loyalty, as we've seen so many times already. The city was split rather harshly among its many ethnicities and their corresponding religions, with a minority population and the Armenians now being the ruling class. And to top it all off, the merchants and their now established 20-some-year-old commune were the real power behind the city, and controlled what came in and out of the city and surroundings with a flick of their fingers. This was a real King's Landing, and Raymond Ruben was no Varus, but seemed more like Joffrey. I would not compare him directly to that little shit Joffrey, though. Raymond Ruben was maybe just a bit naive and in over his head. Of the young Prince Raymond, not much is written of his time in Antioch, but of what survives seems to point to the Knights Hospitaller being the Armenian Apostolic Prince's most loyal protectors and influencers. Which, might I emphasize, is nuts. In 1218, Prince Raymond, with his rogue charter of Knights Hospitaller, would attack Jableh, a fort and town in Antioch, Count Bohemond of Tripoli, in no longer Antioch, and not let go of yet. Despite finding success, this micro-campaign was enough to completely exhaust Antioch. The Principality hadn't gone on their own offensive for more than a decade, and Raymond had just figured out why. They simply couldn't. He just broke them. Antioch needed Tripoli or Cilicia to function as a full state. The corruption and desolation meant this Grand Crusader state practically ceased to be a functioning country, held together by Knights Hospitaller and a few Armenian lords. Raymond Ruben, after being prince of that coveted city but overhyped Antioch, was kicked out of the city the same way he had gained it, through treachery from within the city itself and with those he feasted with. The merchants and nobles revolted in 1219, and now Raymond Ruben found himself the prince held up in the inner citadel, now from the inside looking out. They called for Count Bohemond of Tripoli and formerly Antioch back to rule his city, and he accepted, which at this point I'm not sure is even worth the trouble. In his last effort as prince, Raymond escaped the citadel in the city with the help of his loyal Hospitallers. Raymond returned twice to the same place, that exiled Prince of Antioch, to his uncle's homeland of Cilicia. Surprisingly, he wasn't arrested, nor cut down on the spot for betrayal. Instead, he was brought back to the royal court where he had grown up. He arrived just in time to see his 69-year-old uncle on his deathbed. Aged King Leo's last mistake was his ultimate decision with his nephew Raymond Ruben, and that was simply disinheritance from the Cilician throne and anything Leo owned. King Leo, who probably had a major soft spot for Raymond Ruben, chose not to kill him, but could not bear to make him king after his unfaithfulness. Those were the only two correct answers: kill him or crown him, and he did neither. Maybe he had his reasons. Maybe Raymond Ruben was a little shit like Joffrey. Regardless of this, there were only two other options: King Leo's daughters. Stephanie, in her mid-20s, and married to the King of Jerusalem, John of Brienne. Already they had a son also named John, who held likely the most viable claim for the Cilician throne, despite being only 3 years old. But if King Leo chose this, he was practically handing Cilicia directly to Jerusalem and by extension the Latins. Left with no other option for succession, the 69-year-old did something so drastic I can't decide if he's a genius or utterly mad. His youngest daughter, 5-year-old Isabella, or Zabel, would become heir and queen upon his death. A trusted nobleman named Atam was named legal guardian of Zabel and queen regent until she came of age to marry her first husband. There were 3 more senior inheritants ahead of Zabel. A war for Armenian inheritance was surely coming upon Leo's death, and I think a part of him knew that. He was too smart not to. Just as the Antiochians had fought their own succession war, the Armenians would now fight theirs. But he may have just made the right choice in the end for the longevity of Armenian Cilicia. On May 2nd of 1219, Lord of the Mountains and King of Cilicia for more than a combined 34 years, died from exhaustion and old age, military campaigns, battle wounds, and likely stress catching up with him. Leo Rubenid's body was buried in the city of Cis, where he had spent most of his life. A small chapel that has never been discovered was built around his tomb and remains presumably destroyed or lost. His organs were buried in Akner Monastery, where they presumably remain. A fitting place for him to end. Akner Monastery holds the same histories we use to create stories of Leo like this, and many future sources we will use for Armenian Cilicia beyond him. Prince and then King Leo of Armenian Cilicia was likely the most influential and first king of Cilicia. To describe him in one word would be impossible. Perhaps cunning, maybe wise, untrustworthy most definitely, but never bad to his own people. King Leo was a warrior and brave, sure, but it took him more than 20 years to get Antioch for likely only a few hours total. There's so many ways to describe King Leo that perhaps the only real way is to call him the Magnificent, and just be done with it. Prince Leo made a kingdom, and King Leo conquered princes and sultans, and all this expanding Cilicia to its largest territorial extent, past or present. Before the War of Antiochian Succession was truly underway, Leo had created a golden age for Armenian Cilicia. Many of the country's largest monasteries, fortresses, and new coastal trading cities strung out along the western coast and on islands just offshore. On top of playing with the Knights Templar, Leo also may have created his own Armenian knightly order called the Order of St. Blaise, but it's unknown how much influence this secret order truly had. If King Leo seems almost hypocritical, it may just be our 2 main sources on the guy bickering with each other. On one pro-Rubenid side, there was Vahram of Edessa, who wrote much later, and on the other, pro-Hetumid side, was Sempad the Constable, whose own younger brother would soon take center stage. But before we end this video, I just have to point out something incredible. As both a student of Armenian and Georgian history, both Cilicia and Armenia, emphasis on Cilicia, and Georgia in all its history extended their greatest golden age at exactly the same time. As I've alluded to before, the Zaccharid family was in control of Armenia proper, and they were vassals to the Georgian Empress, Tamar the Great. Cilicia and Georgia were certainly friendly with each other, but Georgia owned Armenia, while Armenia did not, meaning there were technically 2 Armenias. If they could have gotten over this small issue, there was a time in alternate history where Tamar the Great and Leo the Magnificent merged their realms together and conquered the Holy Land for all. Their borders were only about 100 miles apart. Also, I promise one last thing. So the first time I typed in Leo the Magnificent, I accidentally typed in Leo the Magnificat. And yes, this is a real children's book about a cat. I just laughed so hard trying to figure out why I was seeing books about cats that I just had to leave a link in my video. If you have a kid, buy this book for them. If you'd like to support this stoic historian, feel free to do so on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. And join Derek Clark, Savaclio Nazarian, Taj Guilford, Nickmate Vossi, and Lazarus Dykos, Dave J, Dalinar, and Moist Lord. Or become a YouTube channel member like Derek Clark again, Donald Vincent. What? Why? Nickmate Vossian again, God, Heath Dion, Carl Brandy, and Layla, and GOK. Thank you guys for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it.